Okay, today we're going to look at an incredibly important topic in mathematics. You're going to see this from now on, and you've seen it before. But we want to make sure that everyone understands exactly what's going on here when you have a fraction of a number. So the first thing I'm going to do is write down a couple of words, and I want you to use those words to determine what you need to be doing. Because sometimes when you're doing fraction of a number, that means to multiply. Sometimes you're doing fraction of a number, that means to divide. And you've got to know the difference. But it's easy to tell the difference if you just look at the information that you're given. So let's talk first about how to take a fraction of a number and what it means. Okay? So you're going to see the key word of. When you're taking a fraction of a number, of always means to multiply. Oops, I can't spell. There's an L in there too. Always means to multiply. That was bizarre. Okay. All right. That's what the word of always means. You're also going to see another word, and that's per. Now, many times they're not going to use that in the sentence, but you need to use it in your brain to know the difference. Okay? Because you'll see the word of, but the subject of the of, right, the thing they're talking about, is not what the number you're given. And in that case, we need to change it to a per situation. And you're going to see what I mean by that in just a minute. And per always means to divide. Miles per hour. That means miles divided by the number of hours. Yeah? Seen those before. So, anytime you're taking a fraction of a number, say for example, you have 3/4 of, it doesn't matter, 20. That simply means 3/4 times 20, which you could do in a calculator or you can do however you'd like to do it. So 20 divided by 4 is 5 times 3, that would give you 15. Okay. And it's very common that when you do that, you get a whole number answer, but you could get a fraction or a mixed number just as easily. Okay, so be prepared for all the different types of answers you can get. What you must not do is you must not answer with a decimal. If you start with a fraction, your answer should be a what? Fraction. Okay? Unless it's a special case and they ask you for a decimal, or it's a special case like probability, which you'll learn later, where the answers are always decimals, or generally decimals. Okay? So make sure that whatever kinds of numbers you start with is what the kind of numbers you end with. Okay? Now, when you're working with these, a lot of times these are given to you as word problems or applications. And so you have to be careful with the wording, right? So if I tell you, okay, so if you know the subject number, now that's a terrible term. I'm just making it up because it kind of describes what's going on. So if something is the subject, that's what you're talking about. Does that make sense? All right. So let's say I have 1/2 of the students, blah, blah, blah. Who cares? Okay? Sentence. Okay? And there are 34 students. Here's your word of, right? And what is the subject of that of? The students, right? Does that make sense? And what is the number that I have? The number of, but it's number of students, isn't it? So it's students here and students there. That means 1/2 times 34 of the students, right? Do you see what I mean by this? The agreement, the number, okay? So what if I said 1/2 of the cakes, and then I gave you 4 tablespoons of butter? Of is referring to the cakes, but the unit I gave you was what? Butter. The item I gave you was butter. Are cakes and butter the same subject? That means it's going to be divide. So do you see the difference? So we're going to look at several of these. As long as the subject agrees you're taking a fraction of the number you know, then it's just of means multiply it. But if it's some other subject, then it always means divide. Okay? And the way the divide works is you're going to think of it as per. Okay? So much butter per cake, for example. Right? So get used to trying to these out both ways. Is it so much butter per butter? That doesn't make any sense, right? It's a fraction of the butter, yeah? So of makes sense there. But, so you're going to try it both ways, and we're going to look at examples of both. Now, you do not have to worry about the rules for multiplying and dividing fractions, although it just kills me, because you're going to be allowed to use your calculator for this, so we'll use the calculator for these. That's fine. But again, I'm going to warn you that knowing how to do fractions by hand will never go away. When we get to the algebra section, you have to do it by hand. So don't think that now your calculator, you can just clear your brain of everything you know about fractions. Okay? So keep that in mind. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to look at a few where it's just straightforward numbers, fraction of a number. Then we're going to look at some applications, and we're going to first decide, do we need to multiply or do we need to divide? And then we're going to decide and do the math for them, okay? All right, and again, the calculator can do the math for you. So let's just jump over to our textbook. Here we go. So here, first of all, so something like a 2/5 of 50. So that's just a very straightforward of problem. So 2/5 of 50 is the same as saying 2/5 what? Times 50. And get your calculators. Go. Come on. Quick, quick. Like a bunny. 30 seconds. Okay, so we just took 2/5 times our 50, and that gives us 20. Now notice there were no units on this one because we're just dealing with straight numbers, so you don't have to put any units. But if you are working with one of the application problems down here, then you will be given units, which means you need to include them. But in this case, we don't have to. As a matter of fact, anytime you're answering one of these application problems, your answer should be in a full sentence, complete sentence, right? So keep that in mind as you go. That's the difference between just getting credit for the problem and getting a higher grade for the problem, right? Being able to explain it, what's going on. Okay, good job, guys. All right, so we'll just do another just for kicks. Doesn't really matter. Do C. 5/7 of 35. Go. Okay, so again, of means to multiply. You multiply them out, you get 25. Good. All right, let's drop down to some of the applications, because in the applications you're going to have to think a little more about it, because we need to make sure that we're using multiply when we're supposed to and divide. And all of the ones in the top, they've concentrated on multiplication, but that's not going to be the case in all of these applications. So let's look at a few of these. And you'll get used to being able to see, is your of the number given, or is it some other type of units, right? So here we go. Lee is traveling 700 kilometers from Barcelona to Mexico. So he's traveling 700 kilometers. Do you agree? So we have a whole number, it's traveling 700. He stops at Marseille, having traveled 7/10 of the way. Okay? Well, so we need to see, because it says 7/10 of the way, so we need to see, is that 7/10 of what we know? Well, what do we know? Which is how far he's going, isn't it? Which is the same as saying the way. The way, it means literally how far you're going. So do we know how far he's traveling? Yes. So 7/10 of how far he's traveling. So we know it's going to be a multiply in this case, right? So we know how many kilometers he's traveling, so we can just multiply. Somebody want to tell me what you get then? 400 what? 90? There we go. And to make me really happy, what would you say? So you would say Lee has traveled 490 kilometers in his 700 kilometer journey or something. Okay? Who, what, when, where? With numbers. If you don't have numbers to support it, then your sentence is garbage, right? Okay? You could say it different ways, but there you go. Okay. You could have said 7/10 of his journey, of his 700 kilometer journey is 490 kilometers. It's another way of saying the same thing. Okay? But you need to mention how long his journey is and the part in either the fraction or the actual answer. Okay? If you did 490 kilometers, you would get credit for that, but it would be just basic lowest credit, like a 3. Okay? Because that's just multiply with a calculator. We're not very impressed by that. If you put the units on, might bump you up a little bit to a 4. You write a complete sentence. Now we're in 5-6 territory. And it could be, depending on the question being asked, could be 7 or 8 territory. Okay? All right. So you see the difference between the grade boundaries there. All right. Good. All right. Look at 6. So we're told that 2/5 of the money, or 2/5 of the money. So that's our of phrase, yes? Okay. Raised at a charity event is given to the local hospital. The hospital spends 3/4 of their money on a new x-ray machine. What fraction of the total money raised by the charity was spent on the x-ray machine? Okay. Well, hold on just 1 minute. Now, so it's 3/5 of money, 2/5 of money. So is it money and money? Yeah. It's part of it's their money, part of it's not. So it's going to still be multiply. Now, think about it, though. They have 3/5 of their money. They got part of the original money, yes? So it's 3/4 of, how much money did they get, was their part of it? So of the total, the total money was 2/5. So it's always going to be part of the total. So if you have trouble rearranging these, if they're fractions, remember it's always part of the total. So their part that they got was 3/4. They spent 3/4 of it, and they got, that's 3/4 of the 2/5 they got. Okay? So it's part of the total. Now, you're just going to change that to multiply. And can someone tell me what number you got? 3/10. Okay. Of what? Okay. Of the money they got from the charity, right? Or whatever. Okay? Because that's part of the money they got from the charity. Okay? So we're just talking about they spent a particular. So we could say in a complete sentence that the hospital spent 3/10 of the money they got from the charity on the new x-ray machine. Make sense? Okay? Now again, those have been just multiply, but I wanted to show you that one because it was a fraction times another fraction. And when you're multiplying two fractions, sometimes it's difficult to decide which one goes where. Now, it's multiply, so does it technically matter which one goes where? No. Not at all. So you get lucky on multiply. Now, with divide, do you think it matters? Yeah. Absolutely. So that's why you need to always think it's always part of a total. Okay? Okay. Let's look at another one. Look at number 7. I'm doing all your homework for you. That's not good. Tina uses 2/3 tablespoons of butter to make an apricot loaf. How many loaves can she make with 4 tablespoons of butter? Okay. So, our fraction is 2/3 tablespoon of butter, right? And we know 4 tablespoons of butter. But is how much butter she has, is that the question? What is the question? And so this one, we have ourselves a division problem. Okay? And now you can try it again with, because even though it says butter and butter up there, right? Be careful, because our question is how many loaves, not how much butter. Okay? So you could also think of this as that it takes 2/3 tablespoons per loaf. Not 2/3 tablespoons per butter, right? But per loaf. So do you see where you can try it out with that word per? And if it works, sentence-wise, then you know it's going to work. Okay? Now, so that means we're going to divide. I'm going to divide the big amount of butter by the small amount of butter to find out how much butter I need. Okay? So it's 4 tablespoons divided by 2/3. And does somebody want to put that in your calculator for me, please? And you get 6. So that means she has enough butter to make 6 loaves. Okay? So these take some thinking. You've got to watch out for your question. We're not asking about how much butter, we're asking how many loaves. And that does not agree with the subject with the numbers we have. Do you see? Okay? And that's how you know it's always going to be divide. Let's see if we have another one of those. And again, you could make a full sentence out of that if you wanted to really make me happy, which I know is every big goal of your lives, right? All right, those are not. So here, he ate some lasagna, then she ate some of what's left. So they're both eating lasagna, aren't they? So we're talking about eating, how much was eaten and how much was eaten. So is that a divide or multiply? There you go. Good. Multiply. How much now remains? If you eat some and you eat some, how much is left? How can I tell how much is left? Go back to what we did before. It's subtracting. You had a whole pizza, so that's 1 pizza. 1 minus how much he ate minus how much she ate. So be careful. They're mixing operations on you here, right? Even though you have the word of, we're looking for how much remains. How much remains is an addition or subtraction problem, right? It doesn't say what fraction of the lasagna did someone eat. That's up there. That's the map. That's the multiplication one. Here, we're just talking about how much pizza there is left. And how much pizza there is left is just simply subtracting away what's been eaten from 1. Because why 1? Because 1 whole pizza, right? 1 whole pizza minus a part. So be careful. They're mixing operations for you here. Okay? Emma buys 2 identical bottles of shampoo. She uses 3/4 of one of them at home and uses 7/10 of all the remaining shampoo while she's on holidays. In total, how much shampoo remains? What? Come on. Be brave. You're good. Okay. In total, how much shampoo remains? So that's a how much is left question, isn't it? It's not a fraction of, is it? So we'll be careful with this. All right, and here we're going to just practice using division. Now look, remember, you can enter this mixed number in your calculator, and that's what I want to see. But anytime you're asked to do one of these, you better write it down. Write down what the original problem was. Do not just write down a list of answers, right? Because otherwise you're not going to know what you did, and it's going to be meaningless to you. Okay? All right. So we're going to work on these. I want you to practice on just a few of these. I know we've done most of them, and there's not that many of them there. I may look at Education Perfect, so hold on a minute.